explain to me what your writing process is then versus now, and the progress that you've made? Is it the same? Do you sit there, write a joke out? Do you go on stage and talk it out?
My process has changed over time. It's weird because I used to have, you know, those legal notepads, the yellow ones. I used to have those, and on every, I had one where, and this is where I learned about real material versus a premise versus a thought out joke. And I was at the club one night and I had my legal notepad and I'm feeling myself. I'm like, cause I got 3 pages filled with, and each of them had just on each line was a premise. Like it would just be like small towns, you know, fast food restaurants. And it would just be on each line, that would be it. And I forgot who was the headliner that night, but we were up at the bar at the club. And he says, so how long you been doing it? And I said, oh, probably about 1.5 years, something like that, almost 2, close. He says, how much time you got? And I arrogantly flipped through the notepad and I was like, about 3 hours. And he says, wait a minute, what? And he says, so you've been doing it 1.5 years or so and you got 3 hours of material? And I'm like, yeah. He says, how much solid time do you have? So what do you mean solid time? He says, how much time do you have to where from the moment they introduce you to the moment you say goodnight, it gets laughs? And I looked through the notebook and I was like, probably about 5 minutes. So it was a wake-up call for me, because then I said, oh, okay, now I have to figure out what it is to actually develop a joke, develop a premise, callbacks, all of this stuff. So my process changed from, because I'm not as meticulous with writing as, like, say, a Seinfeld. Like Seinfeld sets time aside and says, I'm gonna go write. Today I'm writing material. Mine has to be organic, because to me, stand-up is a part of who I am. So it has to be still fun. It has to come from a place of genuine creativity for me. So my process now is I'll have the premise, I'll have the punchline and somewhat of the premise, and then I write from the punchline. So like if the punch, like I'll go out, so let's say, like there's a joke that I have about snitching, and the joke came about where I was hanging out with a friend of mine. We were driving somewhere, and we were talking about Cops or something, the show Cops, and the first 48, like when people, you know, when they're in the interrogation room and they give up all the information and stuff like that. And I said, man, you know what I never understood? But this is regular conversation we're having. I was like, I never understood why people have that no snitching rule. Like, that's weird to me. Like, no snitching. Man, I ain't know. It's like, I don't believe in that at all. I said, you can call me Snitchity McSnitch. You can call me Sir Snitch a lot. I'm telling on everybody. And I said, they'd be like, Mr. Barnett, are you willing to wear a wire? I'm like, a wire? I wear a fucking GoPro. And I said this to my friend, and my friend just started rolling, and we just started cracking up. And what I always keep my phone with me or recorder with me, and I'm like, you know what? I gotta just, and all I put in there was, I'll wear a GoPro. So the next day, I just had to remember the points of how I got to GoPro. So as long as GoPro gets a laugh, now I know there's the foundation of the joke, and I can work backwards. So it's like a deconstruct for me, because, you know, sometimes in premises, it takes a while, and I've learned this too, is that you write down everything once you're trying to seriously develop the joke. So anything I'm trying to get ready for television-wise, it's a different process, meaning that, and I forgot who told me this, but it's been one of the best bits of advice I've ever got in my life, is that when you're trying to really develop a joke, once you know it, write it out verbatim. And then when you write it out verbatim, you'll figure out exactly what needs to stay and what needs to go. I remember when, before I did my first Tonight Show, the bookers, Bob and Ross, they came to the Comedy Magic Club, Hermosa. And I'm not gonna lie, it was my very first time really kind of dealing with them. I didn't know how the process worked when you're trying to get on a late night show. And by that time, I'd already done some stuff. So I was kind of like, I knew it, but I had never done the Tonight Show. And so we're at the club. I can see them in the back of the room. I can see them there at the table. And so I'm doing my set, and I'm kind of a little bit distracted because I can see them, and I'm like, I don't really think they're paying attention to what I'm doing, but I'm still doing the set. Set's going okay, it's fine. So after the set is over with, I get off stage, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, man, they came all the way down here, they didn't even pay attention to the set, you know? The very next day, I got an email from them, and when I tell you it was detailed, I'm talking about down to the second. They said, at this second, you said this, cut out the ums and ahs. You don't need those, this, and this. They had everything laid out. And from that moment forward, as far as getting prepped for those types of things, I really would do it. I still do it to this day. Anything that I'm getting ready for where I have to be on point, I sit down and I write it out verbatim. I type it out. I listen to it, and I'm honest with myself in the writing process. And this is what I think a lot of comedians need to do. You have to have an honest ear with yourself. What a lot of people don't want to do, and it's hard for comedians sometimes, is have an honest ear with yourself. One of the things I did when I started was I would not invite anybody that I knew to my shows. I would not invite anybody because I didn't want those laughs right away. I didn't want those because I don't want you to laugh because you know me. I want you to laugh because it's funny and you don't have to fake it. So honestly, I was doing comedy for about maybe 2-3 years before I invited anybody that I knew. And by the time I told people I was doing comedy, they couldn't believe it. They were like, what? And I was like, yeah, come on, come down to the show, come down to the underground. And when they came to the show and they saw I was getting genuine laughs, I could see them looking at other people like, oh shit, he's actually, you know. So I would, if I have to give advice to comedians, I would say, it's nice to have a support system there, that's great. But if you're really trying to develop what you're doing, I would honestly say, do it in front of people who have nothing invested in you, because you're going to get the most genuine, realist response. And in that way, by the time you do invite people, you know, you're going to be battle tested. And then they'll see all of that.